Hey, Jeff, can you hear me? Hey, Jeff, can you hear me? All right. Hey, Jeff, thanks for joining. Can you hear me? Hey, Jeff, thanks for joining. Can you hear me? Hey, Stu, John, other John. Yeah, it's it's one way. So I don't know if you guys see the ability of doing the chat, so you can ask questions that way. I'll also keep my phone there so you can send me a text, and we can take that. Of course, we're going to confuse everyone else who's on, but that's fine too. So we're going to give it about another minute or two. At 6:01, and we'll start. But this is the end result of what we're going to try to tie. I don't know if you guys are going to try to tie along or not, or just take notes. I'm not sure if you were able to get some materials from Jake today. All right, so we're at 6 o'clock on the dot, right? So yeah, I mean, I know we got a couple people on. I'm expecting people to kind of join and leave as they want to, and that's fine. But I know I got a couple people on as well, so we'll start talking about materials. We'll talk about some history of some materials too to kill some time, because I think it's really neat to learn about the history of this fly, and then we'll go ahead and we'll get started. So this is the Clawdad, and this is just an incredible fly designed by Chuck Kraft. I was hoping that we would learn this have him actually teach us in class one day, but you'll have to bear with me as I go through, and a couple steps may or may not be right. We've got Jeff on as well. He can help if you guys have any questions, and use the live chat and answer things, and he can also augment if I misspeak or say something wrong. So cool thing about it is this tail material. A lot of Chuck's flies leverage something called ultra suede. There's some really neat stuff. It's incredibly durable, but the most important thing is that underwater it behaves the same. Like when it's wet, it behaves the same as when it's dry. A lot of materials don't do that. So, he had story behind this fly is that there was like this box of material that Chuck went through until he finally found Ultra Suede and found it to be what he was looking for and give him the action that he wanted. So these are our specially laser cut tails. And they look like this when they're not on the fly. And you can find them in a lot of the Virginia fly shops. So the other thing about this fly is it's tied to be very heavy and very front end heavy, right? So when it sits in the water, it should bounce along kind of at like this or like this way as it goes through, and can be very, very effective. It's meant to be fished right on that bottom. You'll want to many of them in the box because you'll lose a lot to rocks and things like that. So let's talk about what we're tying with. I am tying with a 3x long hook. I know in the description and in the email and stuff I had said 4x long, and that's really what you should tie this fly with, to give it a longer body, but it will work obviously with 3x hook. I simply don't have 4x. I'm not at my house, up visiting some family for a little bit, and just don't have access to my materials at this moment. So you can use 3x long hook. We're going to be using some heavy eyes. These are lead painted eyes, but you can use any dumbbell eyes and it'll be just fine. But you want to get large because the idea of this is we want to make it as heavy as possible. For chenille, I've got a couple different kind of varieties here. So this is what they call coffee colored. These are all medium. I think medium is a good thickness for chenille for a size 2 version of the Clawdad that we're going to be tying. I've got a little bit darker. So this is, what do they call this? Medium brown. This is nice, right? A nice dark pattern. And then for fun, I've got this kind of dark olive and yellow, and this barred body makes a really cool version of this fly. So you can kind of see here, it's a little harder with my light condition. It's not the best setup. I don't have my studio lighting, but you can kind of see how that makes that kind of like natural segmentation on the body. So the next thing that you guys need, very important for this fly is super glue. And specifically the type that I use is this ultra gel control. It doesn't have to be made by Loctite. They just make a really good, easy to find version of this because you want the gel because you don't want it to soak into the material and solidify right away. So you'll see this when we get into that. And the last thing obviously is going to be our thread. So I'm trying to match my thread as close as I can to my chenille. And so this is, and I'm using size 140 because I don't want to go too heavy. And this is plenty strong. This is a burnt orange, which I think happens to match pretty well. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna put on my hook into my vise and start tying in my dumbbell eyes. So I actually want to bring my hook up a little bit. I want to make sure this is also not my vise. So bear with me as I set it correctly. Okay, that should be set a little tighter. That should be good. Okay, cool. So I want to make sure that I actually have access to most of this bend of the hook. Because unlike most flies where, usually, where's a bodkin? Usually we'll stop right here with most of our fly tying. In this case, we're actually going to be tying down about a quarter of the length down the actual bend. A little bit different. It's one of the kind of neat things about this fly is that we're tying in an area we don't usually tie. But you'll see that. But the first thing before we do anything is we got to get on our dumbbell eyes. So let me get on my thread base, cut off my excess, bring it back up. And as always, when I'm trying to figure out where to put, especially for a fly like this, this is the same with a lot of Chuck's flies, is I'll actually put on an eye, one of my dumbbell eyes onto the hook all the way up at the front. And then that lets me know I need to go one dumbbell eye length back. So I'll show that again, right? So I've got it up at the front by the hook eye, and I'm going to go one eyelet back. And that tells me, okay, that's about on the hook where I want it. So then in front of that point, I'm just going to put on several wraps And this is going to give me what I call like a thread bump, right? Or a thread down. There's a couple different names for it, but all that does is gives me a little stopping point for the dumbbell eyes to go against. And then I'm going to pull out my super glue. So I've showed you guys this before, but for people who haven't been to one of our classes, what I do for my dumbbell eyes is I put a little drop of, well, that's more than a little drop, isn't it? Just drop super glue onto the hook. And since it's on the hook shank, then I'll take my dumbbell eyes, take off a length of thread, and actually do a full wrap around it. So now I've got a layer of thread on the dumbbell eyes. And as I wrap in, that super glue is going to solidify and really lock these in place, right? So we're going to go ahead and put in 10 wraps, 7, 8, 9, 10. And so now my dumbbell eyes are real skewed. So when I go to the other direction, I'm going to start pulling these back, and I'll do this without pulling it first. You can see with each subsequent turn, dumbbell eye is slowly starting to move forward. So we're going to do about 10. I always put pressure on the eye. So see how I'm turning with my hands. And by doing that, it actually results in the dumbbell eyes moving forward more effectively. So just give it a little bit of a tweak, a couple more twists, and you see now we're up to this point. And so once I get them about parallel, usually should be about the same number of reps, about 10. I now can go ahead. I'm going to put a couple wraps in front to help seal that, go behind, and start wrapping around. So again, what I did was as soon as I got my dumbbell eyes oriented correctly, I went ahead and I put like 1 or 2 wraps in front, switched to behind, and then now I'm going underneath and doing kind of a figure 8 underneath the eyes. And I do this about 5 or 10 times. So let me try to adjust my light so it's a little bit brighter. Hopefully you guys can see this well. Usually I've got big studio lights facing at me, so everything's nice and bright. So now that I have that in place, I can do a couple wraps behind, and these dumbbell eyes, especially after that glue solidifies, these will not move. This is nice because later on, after you've been fishing a fly a lot, if you don't have them locked in, things will start spinning, and it just makes it so instead of this fly riding hook point up like it's designed to do, it'll start riding all kinds of weird orientations and it'll get stuck more. So this is a good way to make sure that this fly is more durable. So after I got my eyes in place, I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping back towards the bend of the hook. So keep coming, keep coming. And so this is our traditional stopping point, right where the barb of the hook is. But we're not actually going to stop there. We're going to instead, we're going to keep continuing to go down that bend of that hook. And so if I look at the bend of the hook, right, I'll keep my my finger right here so you can kind of see. And if I break this bend of the hook down to where I cut it in half, that would be the halfway point. So if I go halfway between that, it's going to be right about where my thread is right now. That's about quarter down the bend of the hook. That's where we want to be. So once I'm there, I'm going to start wrapping back up. And my goal is to make sure that the hook shank just has a layer of thread on it. And I'm going to wrap up to about where the point of the hook stops. So, again, this will be a little harder to see in this light. Let me bend my finger up. You can see the indentation on my finger. Right there is my hook point. Right there is my thread. And we're going to stop there for just a second before we grab our chenille. So we're going to take our chenille. By the way, if you haven't seen me do this before, I actually cut horizontal into the chenille, and that allows me to have a much easier way to handle this material so it doesn't unravel on me. So you just unhook it. I'm going to give myself a good amount of length. If you guys are sharing, Stu and you can actually just cut. You really want probably however long that is. It's about 1.5 feet, 18 inches. Jeff, I know you're on. Do you have a specific length that you'd recommend for them to cut for this fly if they're sharing material? I always just tie right off the main pack. So we'll see if he responds on that one. If he does, I'll let you know, because you may not be able to see the chat. So okay, so just like most of our chenille, we have our kind of end. It's nice and fuzzy. I'm going to take and just strip off, and we'll make sure that you can see where I just have that thread underneath. This thread is black. Um, that gives me my tie-in point, right? So we're familiar with this with woolly buggers and other things that we tie with chenille. So I'm going to go ahead and secure that in place. And then I'm going to start wrapping backwards. Yeah, so Jeff said, yeah, about 18 inches. Somewhere between a foot and 18 inches if you guys are sharing material or you're cutting it for a class. But again, just like I'm doing here, if you have the opportunity, just tie right off the pack. So I'm wrapping the chenille directly to the hook, and I'm coming back to that about not quarter inch, my apologies, that quarter length down the hook band, right? So just enough, and make sure you can see this, where it's just starting to come down the actual hook bend. So by doing that, I'm going to start wrapping forward. I now have lots of material on this hook for which to secure my super glue. And I'm starting right at my tie-in point where I want with this material here. And so as I just hinted at, what we're going to do is we're actually take a bead of super glue and put it up that bend of that hook. So this bead is going to make it so that as I'm wrapping the chenille, it's oh hey Aaron, we just had another great fly tyer join. He's with All Tied Up Fly Tying School. If you haven't checked out his channel, you really should. By the way, he's doing a live stream tomorrow as well. So you guys from Charlottesville, I'll put that up on our Project Healing Water site, so you can check that out as well. And he does his great things usually weekly on Wednesdays, I believe. So that super glue, as I wrap on, is really going to lock in this material. So I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping it. Before I do this, by the way, I'm going to take my thread, just kind of get it out of the way. So I'm just going to wrap it forward. I'm going to unwrap that to come back. And now I'm going to start wrapping my material in place. So as we wrap this, and hopefully this translates well on camera, we're going to get these little, what we want to do is create a natural ramp. So as I wrap forward, I'm going to get to about this point where I'm up at the flat part of the hook shank. And then I'm going to do something what may look a little strange. I'm actually going to wrap straight parallel with the hook behind. This is going to create more of a natural flat area with our chenille, and it's going to make our claws sit so much more natural. So after that flat wrap, I'm coming at like a 45 angle before I come back to my 90-degree angle on the hook shank. And now as I wrap forward, I'll do about 1 or 2 reps forward, and I get an area that's now a little bit thinner than the back area. You can kind of see it's a little bit thinner. So I'm going to do 1 wrap back behind to double that wrap. And so now if you look at it, it's far more even. I know it's a little bit difficult to see with the light. Sorry about that again. So I wrap 2 forward, I wrap 1 back, and I really get this nice kind of even body. And so now I'm in front of my hook point, so you can see my hook point. I'm about 1 wrap in front of it. I'm going to bring my thread back, wind my thread up a little bit so it's a little bit closer. And that allows me to come in, wrap behind material, wrap in front, wrap behind, wrap in front, behind, and in front. So it's really trapped the chenille into place. Because we have to put on our claws. So, I've gone through, I've wrapped my chenille in place. There's super glue underneath it, so it's going to be locked into place. And it's now ready where I can go ahead and I've tied in my chenille here with a couple wraps of thread, and I'm ready to go ahead and tie in my little claw ultra suede material. So we're going to do something again, very unconventional. We're actually going to take the fly now off the vise to do this. So for you guys trying to tie along, just pay attention to this point. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to take it off, and I'm going to take my scissors, because there's usually a little, I don't know if that'll translate. There we go. There's usually a little bit of natural variation. And so if I take my scissors and I come in and just start trimming that down, see how now that's a lot smoother? Let's see if I get the camera to work. Yeah. So now it's now a lot smoother. That's going to make it so that when the claws go on, see how that material is laying nice and flat? That's what we're looking to do. So that's why we did that little bit of trimming. And now we're ready to take our ultra suede claw material and put it on. So I'm going to try to see if I can make the light show this. So you see this? You see how it's nice and kind of bumpy, not smooth, right? A little bit rough. Well, if I flip this material over this side here, and it's really not showing up well, but you'll see it in person. This is much smoother, much more fine. So one side is a lot rougher. The little natural bumps and variations are a lot farther apart. The other side's a lot smoother. This rough side, we're putting onto the hook point first. So let me do this so that I don't poke myself. So I have the rough side going onto the hook first, and the smoother side pointing away. If you don't see the difference, don't really worry about it. All we're doing, this rougher material happens to hold super glue just a little bit better, but both sides will work. And the fish certainly won't notice, and they will not care. So I'm just going to slide that back into place, and then take my fly and put it back into my vise. And kind of pop that into place. So if you're like me and your chenille just went unruly and got in the way, just kind of take it and unwind it so that you've got your thread free. And actually I need to invert my vise so that I have access to the tail material here. And the easiest way I've found to do this, I'm just going to get my chenille out of the way. Let's take a pair of hackle pliers, kind of grab this ultra suede material and lay it down. I've actually come a little too far forward. I should have stayed farther back to that hook point. But once I have it in my hackle pliers, then I can actually just go ahead and grab it and put a couple of wraps in place. And that's going to secure it right in place. And I'm going to put now a number of wraps back. What I'm doing is trying to get my thread directly against this chenille. You'll know when you're there because the thread will start backing up on itself more. Let me pull it off the vise so you can see. Come on. That's really hard. That's just not coming through in this light. Okay, there we go. That's a little better. The thread now has formed a ramp. I don't know if you can see that or not. I know that I'm really far against my chenille. That's going to allow me, so I'm going to go ahead and bring my thread forward, flip my fly back over. That's going to allow me a very natural, so as I take my chenille, I'm as far back on my thread against the chenille as I can. When I wrap my next wrap forward, do you see how that's still even? That's how we maintain an even body on this fly. So I'm going to wrap forward again. Keeping in mind, about every 2 wraps, I'm going to go back 1 wrap, come forward. That's going to keep my body nice and thick. And then wrap back again. And do 1 wrap in front. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop here. So where am I on my hook shank, just so that you guys know? As this fly is all about tying in particular proportions. So if I have, give me 1 second. I need to let go of my chenille, so I'm actually just going to grab it with hackle pliers, give it weight. If I grab another lead eye, I am about almost 1 full eye back, maybe about 1.5. That's where I want to stop. So if that makes any sense, if you have another dumbbell eye and you kind of put it against your dumbbell eye here, you're somewhere about a dumbbell eye back behind. And I'm going to stop wrapping with my chenille. I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to wrap back against it. And I'm going to trap it. So remember to trap, I go behind, one in front, one behind, one in front. Now what I want to do is I want to pull the chenille upright, right? So it's trapped. Now I'm going upright. This part gets a little weird. So I'm going to do this. I normally tie this side in first towards me. So I'm going to do it opposite so you actually see what's going on with the camera. So I've got it up. I'm going to kind of get my thread in front. And what I'm doing is, switch my hands a bit, is I'm trying to wrap this chenille where it's on the side of the hook. I don't know if that makes sense. So we have the top of the hook shank here, bottom here, and I'm trying to wrap this chenille on its side. What this is going to do is create a natural flat spot. This is going to be really important when we go to put on our legs. And I'm trying to keep this area as thin as possible. So I'm not trying to put a ton of wraps here. I'm only putting enough wraps such that each wrap is in front of the last and really capturing in this chenille. And I'm going to be wrapping up until I'm almost behind those dumbbell eyes to where I'm like one chenille wrap distance. That I'll show you when I get there. So this takes a little bit of time. It's a little bit of a pain. Get up to about here. So if I were to wrap my chenille around, see this? It's really hard to see in this light. This part's important. So let me grab a different light source. So that's so much worse, guys. There we go. So it's about one chenille wrap away from the back. Just do not have the light for this. But we've created a little bit of a flat spot for it. All right. Get the vise back in position. So I'm going to leave the thread where it is. Again, I've done one wrap behind the dumbbell eyes. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do a series of wraps forward and back. So I've done one wrap behind the dumbbell eye. My next wrap, I come up and I'm going to go around and across the dumbbell eye. I'm then going to come back behind the eye and wrap in front. So I've got uneven coverage up here, but that's okay because when I wrap back, I'm going to fill that side in. So I'm now wrapping my chenille. I need to extend mine a little bit. Easy enough to do. I'm going to wrap up to the hook eye, and then I'm going to wrap back. Put 2 wraps. We're going to do 3 right up against, pull that nice and snug. And then this next wrap, my 4th, comes right back around this part of my eye. And if you do this right, I'm actually going to put a second wrap in there to really fill that in. If you do that right, this whole area has a little tapered head. Uh-oh, hang on. 1, 2, has a tapered head, and I filled in all the area around the dumbbell eyes. It would help if I stopped popping it off. Okay, so now I'm going to do just one more wrap behind, and I'm ready to start capturing. So I wrapped behind those eyes, grab my thread, and I'm going to start doing one wrap after another on the opposite side, but again along the side of the hook until I wrap back to my original tie-in point. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut my chenille off. So hopefully that makes sense and you guys were able to see that. So at this point, I'm just going to do a couple wraps forward just to clean it up. Wrap my thread all the way forward and come back halfway. And I'm going to inspect what I've got going on here. So I'm just going to look at it and try to see if my thread's even. There's no way that's going to show up with this lighting, but what I can do to ensure it. So this is a cool tip. See these scissors here? In between these scissors is a nice flat area. Well, that is incredibly useful for flattening thread. So I can just come in and squeeze it. And what that does is now makes this even. All the thread wraps got even. And it made it into a very nice even shape too. So when I go to tie on my rubber legs, now I have a flat area, nice curved flat area. So it's got a really nice tie-in point so I can secure the rubber legs in very, very well. So that brings us to what many people consider to be the most challenging part of this fly, right? So what we want to do is we want to end up with a fly with like this really nice, even amount of rubber legs going around the front, flaring out, and then we want these rubber legs being even spacing all around the body coming off the back. So how do we do that? Well, what we do is we're going to use a sheet of rubber legs. These are what specific color are these? Just so you guys know, these are just considered medium diameter, light brown. And they come in a long sheet. And so what I need to do is I need to cut these to a particular length, and then I need to determine how many of these legs that I need. So how do I do this? How did I do this? Well, the key, especially since I'm using a 3x long hook instead of a 4x long hook, but if you're using a 4x long hook, this would still be the same, is the back legs. The length of the back leg on this fly is actually the same length as my entire length of my hook, including the hook bend. So let me grab this is going to be a lot easier if I actually show you guys an empty hook. Let me just grab one out of my pack. All right, so I have my empty hook here, right? And so if I grab this sheet of paper, this will help. So if I look at my hook here, the back legs are going to be the same length as from this section here to right back to where the hook bend is. So that length is my back legs. My front legs, if I turn this hook, is the same length as the gap of my hook. So this distance from here to here is the front legs, and then the entire length of the hook are going to be my back legs from here. So I made a cheat sheet to do this. Chuck actually has little cardboard strips with it divided out. But what I did is I took on my pack of chenille, I made little notches, little scrapes. And so the scrape distance from here to here is the same as my hook gap. And then I know that the length from here to here is the same as my entire hook. So if I grab this and put it against, you can see that's the same length. So that is my cheat sheet. So when I go to cut these rubber legs, what I do is I just lay, this is hard to do because I'm kind of doing it backwards. So I kind of lay this sheet right up against and hold it, and then I'll take and cut with scissors right here at this point. So I've already done that. I've cut out my strip. They're the correct length. And I notice I have them in two different distinct strips. So this next part was trial and error. I happen to know the number required because you know, I had the good fortune to learn from Chuck about this fly. So for a size 2 hook, and this is worth writing down, you will do 7 on top. So 7 rubber legs go on top the hook. Underneath the hook, you do 6. Or if you want to do 6 on top and 7 on below, it doesn't matter. It's 6 over 7 or 7 over 6. That's for a size 2. What that's going to result in is that when I lay this sheet down, I've separated them into 2 different sheets, and I lay the other sheet underneath. When I put my thread and wrap the thread around the hook, those 2 sheets will touch end to end. So 7 and 6. Now I'll show you how I actually go ahead and I lay these on. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I have my cheat sheet handy. So I know that I've got my 2 notches, right? Those 2 notches, that's my front part. If I put that notch back here, I'm actually going to grab it. This is way too hard to do and make sure that everything's filming correctly. So I'm actually going to lay the thing of rubber legs against these notches and then kind of grab with my fingers so that I have in my hand just that front section. So that's what I have, and I've got it marked with my thumb. Put that right over top and then do a loose wrap of thread. The reason why I'm doing a loose wrap is so that I can move these rubber legs around, get them where I need to, come upwards with them, and then pull it tight. Actually have had them trapped. So let me go back in, readjust, come up, and give one tight wrap. I'm going to do about 2 wraps total, and then that's it. Actually need these to come a little farther forward. There we go. The everything just scooched back on me a bit. You can double check that if you want. So I can come in here, I can see, yeah, I'm a little short. The best way to do this, by the way, is to actually mark it with a Sharpie marker. So then, you know, it's ready to go right on. What Chuck actually used to do is he actually used to mark directly on here all the way across, and then he would cut them to length, and then he would just pull off the amounts that he needed. Much more efficient way if you're tying, you know, a dozen or more of these. So I'm going to turn my fly over, take my second sheet, and put it on top. And again, I can do the same method, or I lay on top of here between the 2 markings. Let's see. Yeah, you can see that, and then just kind of grab with my finger so I've got it marked. I can also leverage the fact that I already have these bottom legs on and make sure that I'm at the same distance. So I'm actually going to use that method where I just kind of lay them on. They should come together. Oh, that's really dark. See if that's a little better. Yeah. So you get where the 2 legs are the same length. Once I have that in position, I can go ahead, do my first loose wrap, and I'm just letting it sit so I can kind of adjust these as needed, and then pull upwards and do 1 wrap across. So when you've done this, it's important to look around your fly. What you want to make sure is that the bottom sheet and top sheets are just touching at both sides of this fly. And in my case, they are. And so now I can start wrapping my thread in place. And I need to keep sliding backwards. So I need to start wrapping forward. There we go. So just start wrapping forward. I want to be careful because I accidentally separated these. Make sure they stay in place. And I'm just wrapping up until I'm close to that chenille in front. See how this is naturally starting, make it easier. This is naturally starting to flare. That's when I know I'm getting against that chenille. And once I have it where it's flaring kind of at that 45, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop. I know I've got enough, so now I'm just going to start wrapping backwards. Nice even wraps. And I'm trying to get to the chenille behind. And I don't need the back to flare nearly as much, nor will it. I'm just trying to get back to where that chenille was to make this nice, there's that paper, this nice tapered part of the body. So I can go ahead and wrap. I like to wrap a little bit towards the middle, and then you can finish off your fly. I'm going to whip finish, but you can just do a half hitch if you want. 2, 3, and 4. Pull that nice and tight, and we can go ahead and we can cut off that thread. So now I've got this central part of the body of the fly that is really nice and tapered in. Okay. So at this point, if you want to make the fly more durable, what you would do is you would take just some head cement and you would put some head cement right around these wraps. I can show how that looks. Usually you're going to let the fly dry after doing this before you separate the legs. For the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and separate it very shortly after. So I'm going to take just my bodkin, getting tiny little beads. You can just barely see that on this camera, and work my way around. And work that way all the way around until I have an even amount all the way around the hook. Then the most important part when dealing with head cement is you take a little bit of paper towels, wipe the bodkin clean, and you won't have to worry about any buildup of material on it. Cool. So we now have that where that's around these legs. And so now you say to yourself, okay, well, so what do I do in order to separate all of these individual legs out from these sheets that I've tied on? Do I have to go through and try to pick each one and pull it? We actually don't. This is one of the coolest things about this fly. It's one of the reasons why I love tying this pattern. Again, I usually let this head cement dry a little more than I'm about to. But if you take, let me do it on this. If you take this sheet, get it so that I've got the light reflecting off of it, so it's better to see. And I take my fingers and I just pluck that. I don't know if you heard that, but then it separates them. So then all I have to do is I can just pull them loose. Super easy to do. And so now you notice how they're evenly spaced all the way around. So I'm going to do the same thing to the back, right? I'm going to take it, grab it, and just kind of pull real hard with my thumbnail against it. See how now they're all nice and separated? So all I have to do is just pull them one by one. Now the back half is finished. All those legs nice and even all the way around. So front of the fly is even easier. So all I'm going to do is just actually grab these and just pluck it with my fingers. And you can see that those are now done and they're all nice and even. So I'm going to do the same thing on top. You may have to do this, where they don't all separate, just grab them the little bits and just pluck it. And so when you're finished, these should be nice and even all the way around. Now, if like me, you have a couple where, because ideally the kind of, I don't know if you want to call it a crown or what have you, this front section, all of these should be even, where they're all the same angle all the way across. If you need to, you can just kind of take them, kind of pull them back a little, readjust. If one, like these two are a little close together, I just pull them into shape, and that should make it work. If you have to, you can actually take your scissors and come in and very carefully trim some of the chenille behind it. Just don't cut the rubber leg, and that'll actually help them to fall into shape, because these are just being placed against that chenille in front. But that actually worked out pretty good. I did a pretty good job on that, and that's it. That's the clawdad. Not terribly hard to tie once you know the kind of tips and tricks for it. But that's all there is to. Oh wait, Jeff was probably about to yell at me and say, "Hey, silly, you think you've tied that fly, but you forgot that the back isn't actually secured. So my bad. Here's how you do this piece. So I've actually pulled the tail forward, exposing the chenille underneath. Take your gel super glue. Run a bead of super glue. You can just barely see that. And grab that sheet of paper. That seems to be working somewhat well. There's a bead of super glue in there, right on that chenille. And so now I can go ahead and I can take and lay this down. Yeah, Jeff just said is the thing he always forgets to do until he's on the water. I have never, ever forgotten to do this. Nope, not once. I actually put too much super glue in, so I'm just going to wipe some of that off with my fingers. And then I'm going to take my bodkin and take the middle section of this and just kind of rub this in place. And remember before how we like took the trouble to do some trimming in here? Well, as you can see how that is nice and even? That's why we did those wraps over top one another. That's why we did that one wrap going back this way. So that the result is that you have these claws sticking pretty close to, I like mine slightly tilted up, like it's in like an aggressive position. So if it's sitting on the bottom like this, you know, they're or bouncing along like this, they're kind of sticking up, but they should be pretty straight all the way down. And that's really it. That's really all there is to it. So now it is truly finished because we have everything super glued in place, and that is the Clawdad. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll probably stop the video here. Guys, I know a couple of you are looking to tie this along with me. Hopefully we're able to follow. We're going to do this in class at Healing Waters in Charlottesville in the future once we get over the kind of mandatory shutdown and we get to a point where it's safe for all of us to get back together. We will tie this in person, but this video will stay on this channel as well, my the VA fly tying. So you can, it should post very shortly after I finish the stream. So you should be able to rewind and be able to go back through and see it. Again, I apologize for the poor lighting on this. Hopefully you're able to see these. You guys know how to get in touch with me, reach out. For those of you who aren't in the Healing Waters Charlottesville program, you know, feel free to put a comment in after the video goes up if you have any questions, and I'll try to reach out as best as I can. And thank you guys very much for joining, and you know, hope everyone's well and everyone's doing good. And you know, we'll try to do this again next week. But next week, I'll be back in my house, and so I will have my actual studio lighting and everything. So things will be much easier to see, I promise. So thank you and have a great night.